My boss came to my door on a Thursday night in November with snow on her shoulders and asked me the question I had been dreading for 3 weeks. She said, "Wyatt, why are you avoiding me?" And I should have lied. Any reasonable man would have lied. You tell your boss you have been busy. You tell her the deadline ran long. You tell her your truck has been in the shop. You tell her anything that lets her walk back through the snow to her car and lets you close the door and go back to pretending. But I had been pretending for 4 years, and I was tired in a way that sleep does not fix. So I looked my boss in the eye on the wrong side of my own door, and I said the 4 words I had been swallowing for 2 years. Because looking at you hurts. And she did not flinch. She did not turn around. She did not say what a boss is supposed to say when a man on her payroll says something like that out loud at his own doorstep. She just stood there with the porch light catching the side of her face. And she said 2 words I never expected from the woman who signed my paychecks. "May I come in? My name is Wyatt Callahan. I am 34 years old. I am a Finnish carpenter at a custom furniture shop in Cedar Falls, Montana. 4 years ago, I lost my wife to a patch of black ice on a January road, and the man who walked away from her funeral was not the same man who had kissed her goodbye that morning. I have been quietly putting myself back together with sawdust and silence ever since. And the boss standing at my door asking why I had been avoiding her was Delaney Hollister, 39 years old. The woman who built a 32-person company out of a 5-person cabinet shop her grandfather left her. The woman who had been engaged once at 27 and walked away from it because the man wanted her smaller than she was. The woman who had not let another person past her own front door in over a decade. But on a Thursday night in November, with snow falling and the temperature dropping below 10, my boss drove 18 miles in a wool jacket 2 sizes too thin and stood at my door asking why I had been avoiding her, because something in her could not stand the silence one more day. But here is what I did not know when I told my boss looking at her hurts. I did not know that she had been waiting 2 years for me to say it. I did not know that the man I had seen her with 3 weeks ago, the man I had decided was the reason I needed to walk away, was an investor trying to take her company out from under her. And I did not know that a snowstorm, a half-finished jewelry box sitting on my workbench, and a broken piano in the corner of her office were about to undo every wall 2 lonely people had spent their adult lives building. So why did a widowed carpenter break 4 years of silence by telling his boss the truth at his own front door instead of the polite lie any reasonable man would have told? What had Delaney Hollister been carrying for 3 weeks that finally drove her through a blizzard to ask why he was avoiding her? And what happens when the words "because looking at you hurts" turn out not to be a rejection at all, but the first honest thing 2 lonely people had said to each other in a very long time? She stepped inside and stamped the snow off her boots exactly once. No drama, no fuss, just a woman cleaning up after herself before anyone else could see the mess. She was that kind of person. I had known it from the very first week she hired me. She looked around the cabin slowly, at the fire burning low in the grate, at the coffee table I had sanded by hand over one long Montana winter. And then her eyes stopped. The workbench in the back corner. The jewelry box sitting on top of it. Walnut, dovetailed corners, brass hinges. A lid with an unfinished inlay that had been unfinished for 6 weeks because I could not get the curve of the rose petals right. She walked over to it without asking and ran one finger slowly along the edge. Gently, the way you touch something that still has a secret left inside it. "Who is this for?" she said. "My wife," I said. "I started it about a month before she died." She did not turn around. She kept her hand on the wood. The fire popped behind me and I flinched. "You have been working on it for 4 years, she said softly. "I work on it when I can stand to." She turned then, and the look on her face stopped me cold. It was not pity. I know what pity looks like. I had been on the receiving end of it at every family gathering since the funeral. This was something older than pity. Something that looked almost like recognition. "Sit down," she said. "We need to talk." She laid her jacket over the back of the chair. She sat at my kitchen table in a cream cable knit sweater with the sleeves pushed to her elbows and her hair down and every bit of armor gone. The most unguarded version of my boss I had ever seen. And she asked me directly, plainly, no softening, no cushion, why I had pulled away for 3 weeks without a word. So I told her the truth. 3 weeks ago I had driven into town for hardware on a Wednesday. I parked across from the Lantern Diner on Bell Street. And through that wide front window I saw her. A man in a gray coat sitting across from her. Her laughing at something he said. His hand reaching across the table and touching her wrist. And she had let him. I stood on that sidewalk in the cold for I do not know how long. Then I drove home and told myself I had been building a story in my head that was never real. And I started pulling back before it cost me anything I could not afford to lose. She was completely still when I finished. The stillness she got in difficult meetings when she was deciding exactly how much truth to give back. Then she said it. She said, "Wyatt." That was Sutton Reeve, an investor out of Denver who has been trying to buy the company for 8 months. That dinner was the third time he turned a business meeting into something I never agreed to. I let him touch my wrist because I was about to tell him no for the last time and I needed him to walk out of that diner without making a scene. 2 hours after he left, his lawyer sent a hostile offer letter. I had nothing, not a single word. She looked at me across the table with those steady brown eyes that had never once looked away from anything hard. I said, "I have been an idiot." She said, "No. You have been a man protecting himself for 4 years. That is not the same thing." And then she said something that made the floor shift underneath me. She said, "I have known how you feel about me for a year and a half, Wyatt." The words landed like something dropped from a great height. She said it quietly, without drama, without weight. The way she always said the things that mattered most, like she had been carrying the sentence in her pocket for a long time and had finally found the right door to set it down in front of. I said the only word I had left. "Ow." And what she said next was something I never saw coming. Something so small I had not even known I had done it. Something that happened one morning before anyone else arrived at the shop. In the dark. Before the lights were even on. Something I never once thought she had noticed. But she had. She had noticed everything. She said, "The morning after the warehouse fire, I felt the air go out of the room. 6 months earlier, the sprinkler system in the back bay had blown at 2 in the morning and soaked half the maple inventory, 3 lathes, and the corner of her office. Holland called me at 3:30. I drove into town in the dark and walked through the side door at 4 expecting an empty building. She was already there, sitting on the floor of her office, in her coat, her hair wet from the sprinklers. The chairs were soaked so she was on the rug. She was not crying yet, but she was about to. She said, "Now, across the kitchen table you walked in. You saw me. You did not say a single word. You turned around. You came back 10 minutes later with a paper cup of gas station coffee, a folding chair from the storage room, a dry towel from the supply closet. You set them down beside me. You said 3 sentences. The lathes are fine. The maple is fine. The piano took some water, but it is going to be okay. And then you walked out so I could cry without an audience." She paused. She said, "Wyatt, nobody in that building knew that piano existed. It had been broken for 10 years. 32 people walked past it every day like a chair nobody had bothered to throw out. But you noticed. The only reason a man looks at a broken thing that long is because he is quietly figuring out how to fix it without anyone asking him to. That was when I knew," she said. "A year and a half ago. And every day since then I have been waiting for you to be ready to want something again. I was not going to push. I was going to wait. But 3 weeks ago you disappeared. And I thought maybe I had been wrong. And tonight I drove 18 miles in a jacket that was not warm enough because I am 39 years old, Wyatt, and I have spent 15 years of my life pretending I do not want what I want, and I am done." The kitchen had gone very quiet. The fire crackled in the next room. The wind dragged snow against the windows. The teapot ticked on the stove as it cooled. I looked at her, this woman who ran a 32-person company, who had stood in front of contractors twice her size and never once blinked, who had built an entire adult life around being unreachable. She was sitting at my kitchen table letting me see her, and I knew if I did not say the right thing in the next 10 seconds, I was going to lose her. So I told her everything. I told her about the morning Margot died. How my wife had asked me to drive her out to her sister's because her car was making a sound. How I had said I needed to finish a bid. How she had kissed me on the temple and said she would be home by dinner, and I had not even looked up from the desk. How the highway patrol called at 9:47 that night. How the trooper had to say her name twice because I had stopped breathing. I told her about the first year, the drinking, the empty rooms, how I would forget for 30 seconds at a time that Margot was gone, and then remember, and it would be like losing her all over again at noon. I told her about the jewelry box in the corner of the cabin. How for an entire year I had not been able to finish it, because finishing it felt like saying goodbye. And I was not ready, and I told her I was scared. Scared that loving her meant leaving Margot behind. Scared I would do to her what I had done to my wife, which was not pay attention until it was too late. Scared because I had built a life that did not need anyone, and I had gotten good at it, and wanting something again felt like standing on a frozen lake and listening for the cracks. She listened the entire way through. She did not interrupt. She did not try to fix it. She did not reach for me until I was done. Then she did. Just her hand. Across the table. Over mine. Her fingers were still cold from the snow. The tips were rough from years of handling raw walnut before she had stopped working the floor and started running the company. They were not soft hands. They were the hands I had wanted to hold for 2 years. She said, "Wyatt, you did not kill your wife. Black ice killed your wife. And loving me is not leaving her behind. It is the part of you that she loved choosing to keep going." I could not speak. She said, "I am not asking you to do this all at once. I am asking you to let me come in. That is all. Just let me in." I turned my hand under hers. I laced my fingers through hers. I held on. She said, "That is a start." She stayed for another hour. She drank a second cup of tea. She told me 3 things about her grandfather I had never heard. She made me laugh once, a real laugh, the kind I had not made in so long it surprised me coming out of my own chest. Then she stood up. She said, "I have to go before the roads get worse. Saturday. The shop. 9 a.m. Come find me." I said, "Okay." She said, "Do not disappear on me again, Wyatt." "I will not." She walked down the porch steps and got in her car. I stood at the door until her tail lights disappeared into the snow. I went back inside. The fire was still going. The jewelry box was on the workbench exactly where it had been 6 weeks before. But something was different about it now. Something had shifted in the hour she had been here. I picked up the chisel. And for the first time in 4 years, I knew exactly how I was going to finish the rose. But what I did not know, sitting alone in my cabin past midnight with snow piling on the windowsill and a piece of walnut in my hand, was that 18 miles away in town, on Delaney's kitchen counter, an envelope from Sutton Reeves' attorney was already waiting. And what was inside that envelope was about to test every single thing we had just promised each other. Saturday morning. Snow still on the ground. I drove into town with 2 thermoses of coffee, a tool roll, and every reason I was about to do what I was about to do. I let myself in through the side door, climbed the back stairs, and walked into her office. She was already at her desk. An envelope torn open in front of her. Her face very white. She looked up. "Sutton sent a hostile offer at 6 this morning," she said. 48 hours. I set the coffee down. "What does he want?" "All of it. The shop. The name. The clients. He wants me to stay on as a figurehead for 2 years while he restructures. If I say no, he outbids me on Carver, on Henderson, on 3 contracts I have not signed. He will starve the company in 6 months." I looked at her. I looked at the corner of the office. The piano. I said, "Can I show you something?" I sat on the bench, lifted the lid, pressed middle C. It gave me a flat, dead thunk. I pressed the C above and it sounded like a hammer hitting wet cardboard. I said, "I have been making a list of what is wrong with this piano for 2 years. I never told you. I was waiting until you were ready. I think you are ready. Sutton Reeve is a man who looks at a broken thing and sees a cheap thing. Your grandfather looked at a broken thing and saw a thing worth fixing. Tell me which one of those 2 men built this company." She did not move for a long second. Then she stood up, walked to her desk, picked up the offer letter. She tore it once down the middle. She tore it again across the fold. She dropped the 4 pieces into the wastebasket by the door. She said, "Get the toolbox." I worked on that piano for 6 Saturdays. She brought lunch every time. Sutton sent 2 more letters. She tore both of them up. The third time his lawyer called the shop directly, Holland told him to lose the number. On the sixth Saturday I closed the lid and held out my hand. She sat on the bench. She touched middle C. It sang back at her, full and warm and exactly the way Beckett Hollister had built it to sing in 1962. She closed her eyes. She did not cry. Her shoulders just dropped a quarter-inch the way shoulders drop when a person finally sets down something they have been carrying for a long time without knowing. Then she played a hymn her grandfather had taught her when she was 7 years old. The only song she had ever learned. He had died before he could teach her the next one. She looked up at me. "I want to learn another one," she said. "We will find you a teacher." That same week I finished the jewelry box. The rose on the lid took me 2 days. I rubbed the last coat of oil into the walnut and set it on the mantel above the fireplace. Margot's box, with the wild rose she had carried at our wedding. Delaney came over Sunday. She walked to the box and stood in front of it for a minute. Then she came back to the kitchen and kissed the side of my head and asked what was for dinner. In February, Margot's sister Tessa called. We had not spoken in 3 years. She said, "Wyatt, I am sorry. Margot would have wanted you to be happy. Tell her I said hello." I did. Delaney cried for the first time I had ever seen. That spring she sold her apartment in town and we built an addition on the cabin. 2 rooms and a studio for her with a south-facing window so the light would be right. We moved her grandfather's piano out of the office and into the studio. A piano teacher named Linnea came on Wednesdays. We got a yellow lab. Delaney named her Ainsley. On a Saturday morning in October, almost a year to the day from the night she had shown up at my door with snow on her shoulders, I was sitting at the kitchen table with coffee and a newspaper. She came in from the studio, sat down across from me, looked at me for a long second. "Wyatt," she said, "I have to ask you something." "Okay. Will you marry me?" I set the coffee down. "I was supposed to ask you that." "I know," she said. "I got tired of waiting." "Yes. That is all I needed." She got up, poured herself a cup of coffee, sat back down, picked up the section of the newspaper I had finished, started reading, like the question had been a normal thing, like the answer had been a foregone conclusion, like the rest of our lives starting on a Saturday morning in October was just the natural next thing to do after coffee. The jewelry box still sits on the mantel. Sometimes Delaney walks over to it and says hello to Margot in a voice so quiet I am not sure I am supposed to hear. Sometimes I do the same thing. The piano is in the studio. Ainsley sleeps under it while Delaney practices. The cabin is bigger than it used to be and quieter than it used to be because it does not need the radio on anymore. Last week she came home from the shop and stood at the door for a second before she came in. "What are you doing?" I said. "Listening," she said. "Listening to what?" "The sound of a house with someone in it." I knew exactly what she meant. "So let me ask you something. Have you ever pulled back from the one person who actually saw you because you were scared of what wanting them might cost you? Have you ever told yourself a story about someone else's life because the truth was too much to hope for? The hardest part of being lonely is not the loneliness. It is convincing yourself you deserve it. It is building a life so airtight that no one can get in, and then wondering why no one is in it. It is walking past the broken piano every day and never asking who it belonged to. If you have ever loved someone and lost them, and then been quietly terrified that loving someone again would mean losing them too, hear this. Loving someone new is not betrayal. It is the part of you they loved choosing to keep going. They would want that. They would. And if there is someone in your life right now who has been waiting for you to be ready, do not make them drive 18 miles in a snowstorm to ask why you have been avoiding them. Walk over. Knock on the door. Tell them the truth. The truth is the only thing that has ever changed anyone's life. If the story moved you, do me one favor before you scroll away. Hit that subscribe button. Tap the notification bell. Turn it on. Turn on all notifications. The next story we are telling on this channel is even more powerful than this one, and if you do not have that bell on, you will miss it. Trust me. You do not want to miss what is coming. Some pianos are not broken. They are just waiting for the right person to sit down.